A farmer does not park a tractor because the paint got old. He parks it when it stops making money. That is why these old Massey Fergusons are still dangerous to the modern tractor market. They are simple to fix, cheap enough to keep alive, and tough enough to make expensive new machines look a little spoiled. No touchscreen drama, no dealership panic, just diesel, steel, gears, hydraulics, and the kind of reputation you cannot fake. We are counting down 9 Massey Ferguson tractors that farmers still respect, still repair, and in many cases, still refuse to retire. And number 1 is the 80 horsepower Red King that turned old-school Massey strength into a serious heavy-duty weapon. The MF-35 is where the old Red legend starts getting serious. Launched in 1956, this tractor did not win farmers over with size. It won with usefulness. Under the hood sat the Perkins 3.15-2 diesel, a 152 cubic inch engine making 37 horsepower. That number sounds small today, especially if you judge tractors like pickup trucks. Bad idea. This was not built to impress a salesman. It was built to pull slowly, work steadily, and stay alive in a field. The 6-forward, 2-reverse gearbox kept the power usable. The Deluxe version added a dual clutch, letting the PTO keep running independently. That meant fewer interruptions when running equipment and on a farm. Fewer interruptions means less wasted daylight. But the MF-35's real magic was Harry Ferguson's 3-point linkage. With about 2,425 pounds of lift capacity, this little tractor could handle real implements while weighing only about 3,086 pounds itself. That is the reason it felt bigger than it looked. The hitch, weight transfer, and rear traction worked together instead of fighting each other. At just under 10 feet long, the MF-35 could slip through tight spaces that would annoy larger machines. Its signature was simple: compact size, useful hydraulics, and almost nothing delicate enough to ruin the day. Not the biggest Massey, not the flashiest, but it opened the door for every red workhorse after it. And once Massey proved a small tractor could work above its weight, the next problem was not power. It was keeping the farmer alive when the ground turned ugly. The MF-550 deserves a spot because it solved a problem farmers used to pretend was normal: getting beaten up by the machine all day. Launched in 1976 as part of the 500 series, the 550 was not the most powerful tractor in this countdown. It made 50 horsepower from the Perkins AD 3.152 diesel, the same basic 152 cubic inch engine family farmers already trusted. But this tractor was about more than raw pull. It was about making hard work safer. The big selling point was the integrated safety cab with built-in ROPS, or rollover protection system. That sounds like a boring safety note until you remember what tractors actually do. They work on slopes, they carry implements, they shift weight, they crawl over uneven ground where one bad angle can turn a normal job into a very expensive mistake. The 550 kept the useful mechanical package. It had an 8-forward gearbox, or the multi-power option. Its Ferguson hydraulic system could lift about 3,120 pounds, using automatic draft control to keep the implement working instead of dragging the tractor into a fight. It could not win. The 550's appeal was not drama. It was confidence. A compact 50-horsepower Massey that gave the driver protection without turning the tractor into a complicated headache. That is why this machine matters. It brought safety into the field without killing the old Massey formula. Simple engine, useful hydraulics, and a machine farmers could still afford to keep working. But safety was only half the battle. Once the operator had protection, farmers still needed a tractor that could put more steel in the dirt. If the 550 made the workday safer, the MF-165 made the tractor itself feel tougher. Produced from 1964 to 1975, The 165 was the Massey Ferguson for farmers who needed more than a handy little tractor. This was the move toward heavier work. Early models used the Perkins 4.203, but later versions received the Perkins A4.212, a four-cylinder diesel making 62 horsepower. Again, do not stare at the horsepower number like it tells the whole story. The 165's strength was low-end pull, the kind that matters when the plow is buried, the soil is heavy, and the engine has to keep breathing instead of falling flat. The multi-power transmission gave it 12 forward gears and on-the-go shifting, which helped the driver keep the tractor in the right working range. In real field work, that matters more than speed. A bad gear choice wastes fuel, momentum, and patience. Then there were the wet disc brakes running in oil. That gave the 165 better stopping control for long-term farm abuse. At roughly 6,173 pounds, this tractor had enough mass to bite into the ground. But that same weight had to be controlled when a heavy implement started pushing from behind. Its reinforced Ferguson hydraulics could lift about 3,499 pounds, enough for 4 furrow plows. That is where the 165 earned its nickname. It was not just a small tractor with extra horsepower. It was the moment Massey Ferguson started putting real muscle into the middle of the lineup. Then Massey pushed the same idea harder: more displacement, more lift, and more control for farmers who were done asking small tractors to do big jobs. The MF265 was not a gentle update. It was the point where Massey Ferguson made the 200 series feel like a serious step up. Launched in 1975, the 265 came with the Perkins 4.236 diesel, a 236 cubic inch four-cylinder, making 63 horsepower. On paper, that is only 1 horsepower more than the later MF165. In the field, displacement changes the story. More displacement means more low-speed pull, better engine breathing under load, and more confidence when the implement digs into heavy ground. The 265 could run an 8-forward gearbox or the multi-power option, giving farmers the range they needed for plowing, towing, and general farm work. But the bigger upgrade was the hydraulic system. With about 4,101 pounds of lift capacity, this tractor could handle much heavier equipment than the small classics at the start of the list. That much lift changes the whole feel of the machine. Rear tires need bite. Steering needs control. The front end cannot feel useless when the implement is loaded. That is why hydrostatic steering mattered. It reduced the fight at the wheel and made the tractor easier to manage through long, heavy jobs. Wet disc brakes added the stopping control needed for that weight. Not glamorous, not flashy. Just the kind of hardware farmers notice after years of real work. The MF265 was the torque upgrade. A 236 cubic inch Perkins, stronger hydraulics, better steering, and enough mass to turn diesel power into ground pressure. But ground pressure only matters if the tractor can keep moving when the soil turns wet, sticky, and mean. That is where the next Massey earned its scars. The MF565 was built for the kind of ground that makes weak tractors look expensive and useless. Launched in 1976, the 565 was made for heavy-duty mixed farming, and its real personality was not comfort. It was grip, torque, and the ability to keep a plow moving when the soil turned heavy. Under the hood sat the Perkins 84.236 diesel, a 236 cubic inch four-cylinder, producing 60 horsepower. That number does not scream on paper, but clay does not care about paper. Sticky ground loads the implement, drags against the tires, and forces the engine to keep pulling at low speed. That is where the 565 made sense. The AD 4.236 gave it the low-end shove needed to keep the tractor moving instead of sitting there polishing mud with spinning tires. The optional multi-power transmission brought 12 forward gears and clutchless shifting. That helped the driver stay in the right speed range when soil conditions changed from firm to ugly. In that kind of work, momentum is money. Lose it, and the tractor has to claw its way back. The Ferguson hydraulics could lift more than 3,968 pounds, enough to handle 3-furrow plows and serious mixed farm equipment. Hydrostatic steering helped keep the front end manageable when implement load and ground resistance started pushing back through the machine. Yes, the 565 also had the supercab, with a flat floor and better soundproofing. But that was not the main event. The real reason this tractor earns number 5 is the way its 236 cubic inch Perkins, hydraulic lift, steering assist, and working weight came together in nasty soil. The MF565 was not the luxury Massey. It was the Clayfield muscle tractor with just enough comfort to keep the operator in the seat. But pulling through bad ground is one thing. Controlling that power smoothly, hour after hour, is where the next tractor started to feel like a real step into the modern working era. The MF675 moved the game forward by making heavy work easier to control. By the early 1980s, farmers wanted more power and better operation, but they still needed a tractor that felt like a machine, not a fragile science project. The 675 answered with the Perkins, a 4.236 diesel, a 236 cubic inch 4-cylinder, making 70 horsepower. That gave it more muscle than the 565, but the power was only half the story. The real upgrade was the 12-speed Synchromsh gearbox. Older tractors could make shifting feel like a small argument with metal. The 675 made gear changes smoother, cleaner, and easier to manage during long field work. That matters because a tractor is constantly fighting changes in load. Soil gets heavier, the implement bites deeper. Ground speed needs adjusting. A smoother gearbox helps the operator keep the engine in the right range without losing rhythm every time conditions change. Then the hydraulics put the 675 in a different class. About 5,512 pounds of lift capacity meant this tractor could handle heavy modern plows and serious implements. That load pushed through the rear of the machine, demanded traction from the tires, and made brake control more important. The 675 answered with oil-immersed disc brakes and Ferguson draft control. The Series 27 cab, with noise reduction and climate control, made long days easier, but it should not steal the spotlight. The 675's real value was how it combined 70 horsepower, smooth shifting, serious hydraulic lift, and better control into one usable package. This was the smooth shift heavy lifter, a tractor that made hard work feel less crude without making the machine soft. But before the crown goes to horsepower, there is one tractor that earns its place for a different reason entirely. When the job goes wrong, farmers could actually fix it. Now the podium starts, and the MF240 earns its place for one simple reason. Farmers could keep it alive. Launched in 1979, the 240 carried the spirit of the MF135 into a newer generation. It used the Perkins EAD 3.152 diesel, a 152 cubic inch 3-cylinder, making 47 horsepower. Not a giant number, not even close. But this tractor was never about winning a horsepower contest. It was about being useful every week, every season, year after year. The 8-forward, 2-reverse manual gearbox kept the machine direct and simple. The Ferguson hydraulic system could lift about 3,120 pounds, impressive for a tractor weighing around 4,189 pounds. Add precision draft control and oil-immersed disc brakes, and the 240 had enough control to do real work without becoming oversized. This is where the anti-modern jab actually belongs. The MF240 did not need computers, sensors, or a dealer laptop to explain itself. It was steel, cast iron, gears, fuel, and hydraulics. If something went wrong, a farmer had a fighting chance with basic tools, spare parts, and enough stubbornness. That is why it became so loved in places from the UK to Pakistan. It was not just reliable, it was understandable, and understandable machines are valuable machines. The MF240 is not number 3, because it was the strongest. It is here because when the field is far away, the repair budget is tight, and downtime costs money. Simple becomes powerful. And if the 240 was the field repair king, the next tractor was the one that turned reliability into resale value. The MF135 is the tractor that made 47 horsepower feel like a financial decision. Launched in 1964, it replaced the MF35 and quickly became one of the most respected small tractors Massey Ferguson ever built. Under the hood sat the Perkins AD 3.152 diesel, a 152 cubic inch engine producing 47 horsepower. Small number, big reputation. The reason farmers kept chasing the 135 was not just nostalgia. It started easily in freezing cold, ran for huge hours with basic care, and stayed valuable because parts remained available and the machine stayed useful. That is the holy triangle of old farm equipment. It works, it can be fixed, and somebody still wants to buy it. The optional multi-power transmission gave it 12 forward gears and shifting on the move without touching the clutch. In the 1960s, that was a serious upgrade. It helped farmers keep the tractor in its working range instead of constantly breaking rhythm. The Ferguson hydraulics could lift more than 2,866 pounds, while the tractor itself weighed around 3,300 pounds. That is why the 135 punched above its size. It was light enough to be handy, heavy enough to grip, and strong enough to run equipment that made its modest horsepower look like a lie. The MF135 is number 2 because it hit the perfect commercial nerve. Reliable engine, easy repairs, strong parts support, high used market demand. It was the kind of tractor farmers did not just use. They trusted it with their money. But number 1 is not here because it is the cheapest, the oldest, or the simplest. It is here because it combines power, hydraulics, visibility, and control into the strongest complete package Massey put in this file. The MF390 takes number 1 because it brings the strongest complete package in this countdown. Yes, 1986 made it newer than the old-school purists usually like. But that is exactly why the 390 wins here. Massey Ferguson added the right upgrades without burying the tractor under the wrong kind of complexity. The MF135 may be the used market legend. The MF390 is the strongest all-around package. Launched as the star of the 300 series, the 390 had the kind of balance farmers love and used equipment buyers still understand. It was heavy enough for serious jobs, agile enough for daily chores, and powerful enough to make the older models feel like the opening act. The engine was the Perkins 4.248 diesel, a naturally aspirated 248 cubic inch 4-cylinder, making 80 horsepower. That is the biggest power number on this list, and it mattered. 80 horsepower gave the 390 stronger pull for plowing, hauling, and loader work without turning the tractor into an overcomplicated machine. The 12x12 shuttle transmission is where the 390 really separates itself. Loader work is constant forward and reverse. Scoop, back up, turn, dump, repeat. A clumsy gearbox makes that miserable. The shuttle setup made direction changes faster and smoother, which meant less wasted motion and less punishment for the operator. Then came the hydraulic muscle. About 6,173 pounds of lift capacity. That is the biggest lift number in the countdown. Heavy implements load the rear end, change steering feel, and force the brakes to bleed off serious working weight. The 390 had the structure to handle that job. At around 7,716 pounds, with oil-immersed disc brakes, a highline cabin, and 360-degree visibility, the MF390 felt like the old Massey idea fully grown. Not the oldest, not the cheapest, not the smallest, the strongest all-around closer. That is why it wears the crown. Perkins power, shuttle control, serious hydraulics, and just enough modern comfort without losing the mechanical backbone farmers respected. These old red tractors survived because they solved the problems farmers actually care about: starting, pulling, lifting, stopping, fixing, and still being worth something when the paint is tired. So which one would you trust with your own money? The used market MF135, the field repair MF240, or the 80 horsepower MF390? Subscribe to Mechanics Vault and open the next mechanical file.